Hey guys, welcome back to another Destiny 2 video. Today's video is actually my first completion for a solo flawless run in the new dungeon Duality in Season of the Haunted. It's something I'm really proud of because not only did it take a really long time, but I had a lot of fun doing it, and it was a really good challenge compared to some other dungeons out there. Before we get into it though, be sure to like and subscribe for more Destiny 2 content like this, and let me know what you thought of the run down below or anything else you'd like to see on the channel. Currently working on a Hunter super DPS build, as Hunters currently have the best damaging super in the game, so stay tuned for that. Overall, this dungeon is actually pretty challenging, not just because the bosses have particularly a ton of health and are pretty aggressive compared to a lot more bosses in the game, but there's actually a lot of ways that you can easily get killed in this dungeon that are seemingly random. For example, there's a few tunnels you have to go down, phalanxes with shields, and I'm sure we've all been physics by them before. They're pretty prevalent in the dungeon, and there's just a lot of different things that can happen, like the Scorcher Cabal booping you off the map, or a lot of times you actually hit a platform very awkwardly because of how much traversing there is in this dungeon. So it is pretty tricky going solely flawless, so if you are getting frustrated with it, believe me, I've gotten killed by everything that can kill you in this dungeon numerous times. Just keep trying, it'll be alright. But this first section is just mainly platforming. There's a few memories in here. I didn't stop and pick up any of them just because I was going for time. And as you can see, I think I did fairly well considering I did this whole dungeon in under 40 minutes. And we actually have a one phase on the boss, the Nightmare of Galron, which is the first encounter that I'll be showing you guys how to do as well. The whole video, I'll mainly just be popping in and out to give a few bits of commentary where I feel it's necessary, particularly at the beginning of encounters or wherever I feel certain information might be useful for you guys trying to do a solo flawless run, or just anything I think is noteworthy of saying. But besides that, I'll have timestamps in the actual video line, so always feel free to fast forward if you want to go from encounter to encounter and skip over, for example, some of the traversing sections. So here we are at the first encounter. Like I mentioned, we are going to be going for a one phase. The weapons really aren't anything too crazy. The only thing I would say is more or less required is Tractor Cannon. And then besides that, we're going to be using the classic Hammer Bonk, which is the Soul Invictus and the Roaring Flames aspect. We're also going to be rocking, again, Tractor Cannon for that debuff, and Syntheseps, so we get that ×3 melee damage. And when all this is put together, we're more or less going to be doing 150, 160k damage in one throwing hammer, which we'll basically just be doing over and over again because this boss has 5 million health. And I'm actually going to use a little bit of an exploit to extend our time for boss phase. And you'll actually see me do it in a few seconds here. So right now what I'm doing is I'm checking to see where the Scions are, trying to get both of them killed. That first one that dropped the War Beast banner, we picked up. And the second Scion we're going to kill, but we're not actually going to pick up the banner. And the reasoning behind this is, for whatever reason, if you kill a Scion and then re-enter the room, the game will spawn another one of the same banner. I guess it thinks that, you know, maybe you didn't kill that Scion, or, you know, you're supposed to have a Scion there, but the Scion's dead. We need to spawn another one so they don't get soft locked. So what ends up happening is whenever you kill one of those Scions, you get an additional 15 seconds. So we're effectively going to run through, kill all the visions that spawn after you do one banner, and we're going to go to the place that we left that other banner, where there'll be a new Scion, and kill that during boss phase and get us an additional 15 seconds. I believe this should work if you do it with both Scions. For example, if you have a team of 2 that you want to try to do something like this with. However, I'm not entirely sure because I've really only done this dungeon solo most of the time. And the first time I did it very haphazardly with a friend. So I haven't really gotten a chance to test that out yet. But again, you're going to run through this banner like you normally would, you know, killing these visions, going through the dungeon normally. And then you'll see as we go up here and we end up clearing everything out, When we go to the next section, that Scion will be respawned, that banner will still be there. We'll take the banner, we'll leave the Scion alive, and then we'll repeat. Again, since we took the banner and left the newly spawned Scion, whenever we actually go through and get past all these visions, which are currently body blocking me, we'll actually kill this guy, and our timer goes from 48 seconds to 1 minute and 1 second, giving us effectively an additional 15 seconds for boss phase. And this boss is actually fairly easy to solo flawless using this strat. However, it can get pretty difficult because of ad management. And what I mean by that is we're currently utilizing the Cabal behind us for 3 things. The first, like you just saw me do with the melee, is a throwing hammer reproc for Roaring Flames, as well as our healing with restoration through sunspots. And then we're also using it for proccing Syntheseps biotic enhancements, because we need a minimum of 2 Cabal with us at all times in order to keep up that buff going, because the boss will count as 1 enemy, and then we need 2 more to get us the 3 enemies needed for the biotic buff. But as you can see, we're more or less just kind of hitting it. We're healing so much damage that nothing that he's really doing is going to even come close to killing us, as long as we're keeping up the restoration effect. So we're good to go, and we can go on to the next encounter. By the way, if you're curious about the specific build that I'm actually using here, as well as mods, for example, I do show it off at the end with the Loreley helm that I used for the final encounter. But if you're interested in a more detailed breakdown, my most recent video, the one before this one, is the one that does a full build breakdown, synergy with the class and everything. So if you're interested in a much more detailed explanation of what's going on, feel free to reference that. You notice in the tunnel section, I actually pull out my sword and melee to stop our momentum here. This is one of 2 tunnel areas in the game that are what I believe legitimately designed to kill you, because if you go down that thing at full speed, you're going to hit the platform below you, and even if you're blocking with a sword, you'll pretty much die instantly, and that's always a great feeling for ruining your solo flawless run by doing that. So highly recommend putting on a sword, not only to traverse those sections, but also for that, and just melee the opposite direction of where you're going before you actually come out of the tunnel, and that stops all your momentum, and it keeps you from just getting ragdolled into the floor. And believe me, you definitely don't want to be in like a 30-40 minute solo flawless run just to die to momentum and physics. That's definitely not a good feeling. And here we are into the statue room, and this one is pretty easy to do. For me, it's always the same as well for which statues need how many turns. Effectively, you need to turn all the statues to face the center, and every time that you turn them using the button you see on screen, they'll turn 90 degrees counterclockwise. So for me, I always have this one statue that needs turned 3 times, and the other 2 need turned twice. In case you are interested too, in the overworld for this room, there is the loot chest above one of the platforms near the statues. And if you go into the realm here, at that same location is actually another memory, in case you're interested. So here we are onto the second encounter, and this one is probably the easiest, but the biggest problem with this one is how many ads there are. There is a constant spawning of ads in both the overworld and the Nightmare Realm that we're calling it. Throughout this entire encounter, it's just so many ads. Highly recommend you spec into survivability or any kind of health regen. With Solar 3.0 and Restoration, it's actually really insane how much damage you can just simply live through. Highly recommend doing that if you are able to. However, this is going to operate more or less the same way. We're going to go find the positioning of the different room sides based on the relics that are needed in the overworld, go into the Nightmare Realm like you just saw me do, and deposit these, and then after we're done depositing the two, it's boss damage for the ad in the center, and we have to kill 3 of those ads, so you're effectively doing around 6 trips in and out if you're being efficient. You can do 2 in one go, however the timing for it is incredibly tight. Anytime I was able to do so, it was within like a 5-second window. And again, you definitely don't want to waste your flawless run because you are being greedy or trying to do things super quickly. As with any solo flawless of anything in the game, it's better to take your time and be a few minutes later than what you would like than to die and restart all over again. Trust me, I've done that way too many times with this dungeon. Just take your time. It's okay if you're going to need like an extra minute or 2 to just sit there. For example, in the final boss room, you'll see I end up just kind of taking my time, a few moments, just sitting behind a barricade, letting my abilities regen, letting my health regen. It's better to stay alive and take it slow than to restart. You can see I'm looking where the bell is at all times pretty much because the bell keepers will always spawn opposite of the bell. So anytime that I'm done getting the banner that I need to get before going to boss phase, I'll look around and see where the bell is, go to the opposite side and kill those bell keepers, either with hammers if I need to reproc Roaring Flames and my healing, or if I'm like, good on all that and I have plenty of time, I'll just shoot a Wither Horde and throw a grenade down and have it pretty much take care of it for me. As far as what I recommend for this section too, realistically throughout any class, anything that has good survivability is always recommended. If you have, for example, Hammer Bonk like on Titan, highly recommend that because you can see we really aren't even using our weapons that much. We're mainly just relying on our hammer throw. But anything with blinding grenades is really good just because of the amount of ads that are in this section. The new linear fusion rifle actually does insane damage. I believe it's like 30 to 40% more than a threaded needle just because it's a 3-shot. And that does insane damage too for bosses. However, swords are always a good option because with all bosses in this dungeon, if you use a well, for example, or just any kind of healing and sword DPS build, you can pretty much just sword the bosses outright. Especially in the final area with Kaido as the final boss, you can pop a well down and then just melee her to death with a sword fairly easily. But again, anything with great survivability is always recommended. So there we go. There is the completion of the second encounter, and of course the next loot section. From here, I'm just going to put my ramp parts back on and, keep using my sword because we're going to be traversing a lot this section. Just be warned, if there is another tunnel section coming up after the large room we're about to enter, so be careful of that, again, especially considering the fact that we just beat the first 2 encounters, only are on the boss phase after this. Let's make sure not to die from the tunnels, because again, I've done that once or twice. It's definitely not fun. Better to play it safe. So finally, we are on to the boss phase, and the number one aspect of this boss and the way that you can actually get to solo flawless completions is through survivability. Don't worry about damage. If you have something that does decent damage and you can 3 or even 4 phase her, that's perfectly fine. And I ended up 3 phasing her myself. But the biggest problem with this boss fight is the amount of adds that are there and the amount of ways you can die in this fight. You have Scorchers that can basically physics you off the map, especially in this nightmare section. As you can see, there are a ton of adds both in the overworld and in this nightmare realm. There are so many ways that you can die in this dungeon. Survivability is one of the best things you can spec into. You notice I'm not even using Syntheseps anymore, despite having used it basically the entire time. We're actually using Loreley because we get ×2 restoration in our sunspots, and also that emergency barricade, especially in the boss fight where there are those snipers that are really annoying to deal with, can auto-proc and basically save your life, and it actually happens multiple times in this dungeon. As well, you'll see me take a few seconds, especially after boss phases, where I'll more or less just kind of sit in my sunspot, and I'll just wait for my abilities to regen, I'll wait for my health to regen, and we'll go from there. It's better to just stay alive, take a few seconds to collect yourself, kind of find your bearings, don't really worry about rushing through anything. And again, although I actually go through and I take 2 banners at a time, if you're just really overwhelmed with ads and you just want to get 1 banner and then get out of there and then recollect yourself and go from there and just make 4 trips instead of 2, absolutely do that. Do not rush yourself, and especially since there's no real good indicators for which sides actually have which banner, if you get disoriented, don't try to worry about getting both banners. Just get out, reorientate yourself, and then go back in. So just like that, we are ready to move on to boss phase after we place all 4 banners. Just simply shoot any of those red crystals and it'll actually start ringing the main bell, which will then take you to the Nightmare Realm, quote unquote, where there'll be 3 sets of 2 bell keepers. Simply kill them and the bell's actually ready to be used for DPS. You're gonna have to predict which way the kettle actually goes for each bell being solo. So I see her moving left, I go to one left, kill the bell keepers, and ring the bell when she's nearby. This effectively stuns her and takes away her damage reduction, and from there we can do damage. Again, I'm using the new linear fusion rifle from the dungeon, which is a 3 burst. I have rapid hit and vorpal on it, and combining this with radiant, we're hitting her for 120,000 damage each 3-shot burst. And you know, with rapid hit, it's not auto loading, but it definitely gives us increased reload. But again, I'm using Loreley so I can just pop my barricade and keep alive with that restoration effect, as well as getting that radiant effect and everything. And as you can see, she has a lot of health, so don't worry if you're not gonna like 1 or 2 phase her. I would be amazed if someone could even 1 phase, hell, even 2 phase her solo anyway. So simply take your time, don't worry too much about how much damage you're doing. Again, stay alive, take longer to get that completion if you need to. But again, you have to kind of predict which way she goes, and you'll have a few seconds to kind of collect yourself, go and ring the bell, stun her, and then you go into DPS phase. And after that's all over, you can then just simply kind of hang tight, wait a few seconds, and she'll run back in, and the whole process repeats. I always keep my super for this section because typically after boss phase, I'm out of my melee charge. I use my grenade charge, my shield charge is gone because I've been using it for survivability during DPS, and I'll just kind of pop my hammers to stay alive because those snipers do a ton of damage, and I'm even using a sniper resist and a solar resist mod, and they're still hitting me for about 20% of my health. Keep in mind, this is with tier 10 resilience too, so on top of this, I even have a 40% damage resistance, so they hit for a lot. I always save it just for the very end because I use the damage resistance stacking with my super then just to clear them out, get solar kills, get my health back up, because I have definitely been on like 1 more boss phase or something like that and had those snipers kill me after damage just because for whatever reason they just start hitting their shots all at once. But after this, you more or less just repeat the whole process. There's really nothing else to it. Again, survivability is the #1 thing in this boss fight. There are so many adds, there are so many different ways you can die in this. Stay alive, play safe, and also watch out for the bell keepers themselves. Those scorch tanks on their back will basically one-shot you if you're standing right next to them when they go off. That's why I'm also using Wither Horde, because not only is it decent for passive boss DPS, but also I can just fire it at bell keepers later on and just not deal with them. I don't want to get close to them, I don't want to get booped off the map, I don't want them to explode and basically one-shot me. I just want them dead. So I'll fire Wither Horde and kind of just play from a distance in here just because I've been booped off the map so many times with these guys. And just like that, that is solo flawless on the Duality dungeon. As you can see, I was pretty excited because I basically spent all day grinding for this, and I just got kind of unlucky. I got a lot of architect kills because of phalanxes or just weird physics moments. Still looking for the sword though, so whenever I get that, I'll definitely be doing a more dedicated guide and build guide with it. But thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this helped you if you're interested in clearing the dungeon for yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.